I was a statistic. As a chef who had a frazzled nervous system, a worn out body, and who abused alcohol, I wasn't alone in being down and out. According to a study done here in Canada, which, by the way, can I say, it's lovely to see studies that are done here in Canada. Most of the studies I run into are from the States, which I love my American friends, but good God Almighty, can we have our own studies? Thank you. Anyway, the study done here in Canada, 87% of frontline staff experienced burnout, 77 reported depression, 84% faced high levels of anxiety, and 63% struggled with disordered eating. And notably, 67% of workers who responded to the survey kept their struggles to themselves, because finances was the biggest obstacle in getting help. And I doubt that the numbers would be much different worldwide, or at least in the States, but these are something alarming. In an Australian paper, which studied and tracked suicides from 2006 to 2017, they found that chefs had a much higher suicide rate than non-hospitality sectors. I think I don't know if I did a podcast one, maybe on an older podcast I talked about, or a blog or something, I talked about the 10 or 12 most industries that were most the most prevalence of suicide rates, and hospitality or chefing that was always in those lists, which is sad. When it comes to addressing mental health, addressing psychological safety, addressing adequate pay, adequate breaks, these were some of the factors in the suicides, because people are repressing and suppressing their emotional experiences. Like many people, you don't have to be in hospitality. A lot of people are pretending to be okay when they're not. And it's important as leaders, and I share a lot about leadership and other things I do. Setting the tone for the work environment is so important, especially in hospitality. As I was thinking about this episode, and welcome to Seared, Stories from the Stove podcast. My name is Paul Silva. It will always be and always remain Paul Silva. I was thinking about mental health, and maybe because it's the time of year and people are getting all anxious and upset, and holiday season brings up a lot for people. And I was thinking back to all the experiences I had, all the experiences I've seen other people have. And, obviously mine has been suffering from addiction. I was probably one of the few, I was like the unicorn in recovery, in a treatment center where I didn't have anything running concurrently with addiction. There was a lot of other mental health diagnoses that go along with addiction, or different kinds of addictions. And I always felt when I was in treatment, I was like, why can't I have more than one thing? I was jealous. Can you believe it? That's how sick I was. I was jealous of other people struggling with more things. Oh my goodness. I was, I am always guarded about sharing experiences that I've had with addiction, because it does bring up a little bit of shame. Not a lot, but it brings up some. And part of me is also it feels like it's for shock value or something, which is not. I'm not that kind of person. When I wrote my book, Longing for the Spirit, I purposely kept out my war stories because that wasn't the point. And so anyway, I do remember being at one place. Obviously, I'd been drinking, and it was one of those times where I couldn't speak. I couldn't say a word. It was like I was trapped in my own body, and I was aware of what was going on, but I couldn't speak. And, I guess the people that were there, they called an ambulance. And I remember one guy who worked there, and this was a place that worked with vulnerable people, ironically enough. And so there was a guy that worked there. He gave me a kiss on the cheek, as a way, and I understood why he did that. And I didn't really know him, but it was kind of like, I understand you, and I know what you're going through. And in the end, it fell apart, and I ended up going to the hospital. I ended up sneaking out and trying to get my stuff. I tried to break into the office to get my stuff so that no one else so my wife wouldn't find out and all this. Of course, in the end, it just didn't happen. And it all came out. And, the emotional impact was that overall it was scary, but I dismissed it. I had such crushing shame and panic and uncertainty and a deep feeling of not wanting to be here anymore, which happened often. And it definitely impacted my family, my employers. And again, it was ironic that, I was there to support others with their mental health struggles, and here I am knee deep in mine. And, maybe it was meant to be in certain ways. And years later, I did make amends to the employer there. So and it was that's a whole different story, but that was interesting. We definitely hugged it out. And that wasn't the first time that I'd zone out. There's times where I felt like I was a zombie. And in those times, like, I lost money, I lost respect, I lost future prospects, I lost everything because I was in a position where I couldn't stop myself, or felt like I couldn't stop myself. And the depression that accompanied all this was crushing as well. And how I didn't become another suicide statistic is only one for the universe to explain. Things were darker than Spinal Tap's Black Album cover. But I do talk more about my story in episode 6. I don't get into a lot of gory details, but I do share my journey if you're interested in listening. So that's going way back, episode 6. In terms of other people's struggles, I have been privy to many others' struggles before, during, and after my own addiction challenges. I've had employees discuss their eating disorders, their sex addictions, depression, burnouts, everything. Even as a coach, obviously, I'd hear a lot. I've seen a lot of untreated mental health issues. And I've seen people who I have hired myself who seemed fine at first, but then unraveled into episodes where I thought I would have to call security or the ambulance or whatnot. So it's out there. And so what I wanted to share is, why it is in the industry, in hospitality, there's so much struggle. But you don't have to be in the industry to understand, because I also want to share about, kind of strategies for improving your mental health and how to support others who are struggling with mental health issues. And if you are struggling yourself. So this is not necessarily for anyone who's specifically in hospitality, as usual. I mean, that's the whole point of the show, is not to is to expand and open things up. So I'm going to share a few things in a moment. And so grab a coffee. Grab nothing. How about this? Just don't grab anything. Just sit there, fast forward 10 seconds, and you'll jump right in. Like, can we stop pretending like I actually go somewhere and do things? I just hit pause, cough a little bit, have some coffee, and then I jump right back into it. So what makes the hospitality industry challenging? Not that it causes mental health issues. And I just want to be clear. Sometimes there's people who have, they have it. There's nothing necessarily that there might be instances or situations or environments that get triggered. Again, I'm not a mental health expert, but there's certain industries, like I mentioned before, that have high suicide rates, and not all mental health issues, of course, end up there, thankfully. But there's other industries that have their own challenges. All these have their own environments. I was trying to think back, like I believe like first responders, construction, doctors, veterinarians, real estate. I think there were forest, fishery, and hunting. Yeah. So like agriculture, that always surprised me. Arts and entertainment, that doesn't surprise me. Healthcare and social workers, that doesn't surprise me. Real estate and finance, yeah. So there are other industries that also have high suicide rates. Anyway, we're talking about mental health, and specifically in hospitality, and this can probably be common in some other areas, but there's factors like long hours and unconventional hours, chronic high stress matched with low wages, places that are, where you're overworked and underpaid, which is many. There's in hospitalities, there's pressure to skip legal breaks and giving unmanageable expectation and workloads. And then add to that, over the last couple of years, the pandemic, the Great Resignation, and pressure just mounted as people were fearing losing their jobs and their businesses. And of course, addiction has always been a big player in the hospitality game, because it was a way of coping with pressure. It was, you go out after, it's one of those things where even, in some places, drinking during work was not frowned upon. A lot of it was normalized. Drug and drinking use was normalized. There's fatigue, there's high pressure, there's performance expectations, customer interactions, right, that lead to burnout and anxiety. When you're working all these hours, when you'd be working when all your buddies would be out, there's social isolation, right? And trying to have connections with people while you're in a really high-paced environment. And, one of the things, too, is, one of the things that they also looked at is during one of the stats I don't have in front of me was that people in hospitality, many of them did think about harming themselves, and some would actually look up online while they were at work, and sometimes multiple times. So people were like, it was so bad for some people, they were like dreaming of escaping, the ultimate escape, while at work, while in the place that was bringing them that stress. Of course, there's other factors. Again, mental health is not just like a, one thing, that covers everyone. But there is such a prevalence in these kinds of areas because there's also no support. A lot of restaurants don't have an HR department. Most places don't. There's not a lot of that. And add to that the macho culture that the industry would have. We would wear, all these things as badges of honor. Like, I worked the most hours. I was under the most stress. I was like, we applauded that. You see, like, how tough I am. I'm tougher than you. I can handle this. It reminds me of that movie Pushing Tin. It just came to me. Cusack, what's his name? And Pushing Tin was, I guess, what air traffic controllers call what they do, right? Like managing airplanes, pushing tin. And talk about pressure. And Cusack's character burns out, right? And anytime someone burns out and has to leave, they're given a nickname. And so Cusack was one of the cool guys. He was always in there, and he didn't think he'd burn out, and he burnt out. And he came back and saw one of his fellow air traffic control buddies, and he's like, so what was the nickname given to me? He's like, no, come on. He goes, I want to know. And I can't remember, but it just came to me because that too was this macho like thing. And it's like, this can't happen to me until it does. And so this can happen across the board. Now, you'll hear many of the same things talking about how to help with your mental health issues, or just your mental health in general. right? You don't have to have been diagnosed with anything. But some of the things that, you'll always see is like, self-care. So these are strategies for improving your mental health, like sleep, prioritizing sleep, practicing mindfulness and meditation, physical activity. And doesn't matter, and what you do at work doesn't count. We're talking about going for walks, jumping on your Peloton, taking the dogs for long strolls, whatever it is, and having a healthy diet. Now, pardon me, a lot of these, as I'm reading, all of this went out the window when I was working. Sleep was fractured. There was no such thing as mindfulness or meditation. Physical activity, I'm like, well, I do a lot of stuff at work, I'm done. And diet, forget it. Chefs eat like we eat like seagulls and raccoons. No nutrition. And so there you go, right there. Like the self-care just went out the window. Other things is, managing stress is so important. And a lot of those things I just mentioned can help, but, managing your time, setting boundaries. How many times have we talked about setting boundaries? Seeking social support. So not isolating, because there's so much isolation that happens out there, especially now. And it's so important just have people in your life that you can talk to, people that you can relax and lean into. And then there's professional help. And yes, not everyone can afford therapy and counseling. I get that. And I hear that a lot. It's like, it's a privilege. And in many ways it is. But if you're lucky enough to work in a place that has an EAP, an employee assistance program, that's how I started getting into therapy and stuff, was through that, through work. Now, if you don't have that, there are like free online peer groups that you can find. So I'm not saying these are the solutions. If you're in school, there could be a counselor. Meetups, people do meetups all the time for certain topics. If you're lucky enough to have friends who you can lean on, you can really have meaningful discussions with them. You can go to your doctor and see what recommendations they have. There's community centers, workbooks you can use, online resources. So there's things that you can. Is this going to solve everything? No, because maybe some people need medication. Some people, again, I can't cover everyone's unique problems, but there are some ways that you can. Now, if you know someone that's struggling, that's really hard. That's really hard when you see someone struggling in plain sight. And here's a few things that you can do. Again, we're not solving it for them. We're just there. One of them is just to be present and listen. To listen without judgment, right? Validate their experiences and feelings. And by validate, it's like, yeah, that's like, it's like normalizing their emotions, as opposed to, oh, you're just overreacting. Oh, there's just think positive, like that bullshit. Just like, yeah, that sounds like it's really hard. That sounds very stressful. I can imagine, because you're juggling this. It makes sense. Anyone in your shoes would feel that way. And in this way, like you're not going to minimize their struggles. And some of the things that, please don't do this. Don't tell them to get over it. Don't tell them to just be happy. Just think happy. Turn that frown upside down. Or just practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. Are you grateful? What are you grateful for? It's like, dude is about to jump off a bridge, or is like snorting lines like it's the cure for cancer. And you're just practice gratitude. Now, I love gratitude, but some people are not ready for that at that moment. Other things to avoid, it's like, oh, it's all in your head. This is the one that drives me nuts. Other people have it worse. You can't complain. People have with that logic, the only time you can complain about something is if you're dead. Do you know what I mean? So cut that shit out. Or everyone gets down. Or have you tried yoga? Have you tried shutting your mouth? Is what I would say. Or a certain tea. Have you tried chamomile? Or this too shall pass. Or this is meant to be. This is God's plan. Or the worst, like suicide is selfish. Don't even get me started on that. You can encourage people to get professional help, like gently. Like, hey, have you thought about sharing this with a therapist? Have you thought about, or helping them to find resources or to make appointments? Again, these are all depending on how close you are to them. or practical support. Some people, maybe they need help, such as doing daily tasks like running errands or something like that, or you can offer to accompany them to appointments or social events, again, depending how close you are to them. Now, if you are supporting someone with mental health challenges, it's important that you take care of yourself so that you don't burn out. Again, having healthy boundaries to protect your own well-being. And one thing I do share with people when having difficult conversations of all kinds, doesn't matter what, is use the I statement. Like, I feel that when you do X, Y happens, or it impacts me this way. Because when you share the I statements, people can't argue with you because it's your experience. As opposed to you do this and you, and as soon as you start doing that, they get defensive, right? And lastly, just be patient, understanding. Recovery takes time. Celebrate the progress. There's a whole different kind of conversation to have when someone's suffering with addiction. I'm not going to get into it now, but there's a lot more involved. But these are just kind of general ways of approaching someone. This could be a coworker, could be a sibling, could be whatever. So hopefully that can help. And if you yourself are struggling, the problem is it's hard, especially when it comes to addiction and abuse, alcohol abuse disorder, etc. It's hard for us to see it. But if you are feeling challenged in other ways, like just look at the signs, just recognize the signs, right? Because things like, changes in your mood, your sleep patterns, your appetite, and you can kind of like maybe note them. Also, like, again, build like support network. There are other people, whatever you're going through, people have gone through. Like, hate to tell you, sunshine, you ain't unique that way. So finding people who can support you, obviously professional help if you can, and just understand that there's, I mentioned shame earlier. It can still pop up for me, and it's been 13 years since I got sober. Is just overcoming, that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to get help. So hope that helps. This is the time of year where people are getting crunched for time and have to deal with family issues, and they're getting stretched financially. They're comparing themselves to the whitewashed Christmas or holiday classics and what other people are posting online, and where a lot of things come up, right? And if you're in the hospitality industry, you're still working when other people are off, and you might be getting, on top of what I just mentioned, you're getting absolutely hammered at work. So please tend to your mental health. It's the most important thing you have, your health in general. And seek help when needed. Create a more supportive structure around you. And for those who are witnessing other people's, maybe show some compassion, empathy, support to those who are struggling. If you're doing okay yourself, a lot of times, like, oh, I'm okay, so what's wrong with you? That is the most egregiously bullshit way of looking at things. It costs nothing to ask how someone is and actually want to hear it, like encourage it. I'm not saying go around and play counselor. That's not what I'm saying. But when people are struggling, a lot of times they have shame around it or the macho nonsense. Sometimes people do want to share. And so encourage it. I can tell you, as someone who struggled a lot, I kept a lot to myself. I didn't want to be seen as weak. I didn't want people to know the struggles. I felt shame around it. I felt like I was worthless. There was a lot of feelings. And I remember the few people that got through, and just the relief I found in being able to share without judgment, without shame. It was life-altering in many ways. So you can be that person for someone, or you can reach out to someone. There's no shame involved. I don't want to say don't be ashamed. I can't tell you what to feel. But just know that others have gone through it, and there are people who love and care for you. So do with that what you will, homie. Housekeeping, there will not be another episode next week, so enjoy your holidays with your fam or whoever it is, be there with kindness and love and gentleness and acceptance and all that stuff. And if you're going out and you aren't crazy about going out if it's especially for mental health reasons, have an exit plan. Especially, like, again, if you're visiting people or going to places that feels a bit unsafe for you, like, have someone you can call or text if you're feeling out of sorts. Don't rely on someone to take you somewhere. Like, make sure that you can get back home on your own. So whether it's an Uber or you drive yourself. And again, you don't have to do anything or see anyone if you don't want to. Your mental health trumps hurt feelings any day of the week. All right. With that, I'll see you in 2025, my friend. Kitchen's closed. Now scram.